So last night we watched Hitch, a 2005 romantic comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it kind of got me thinking about formulaic films, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we were talking about this a little bit, but I kind of just wanted to have a conversation about what formulaic films are and whether they're necessarily, bad or good, or what makes a film original, you know what I mean? So I figured I'd give some examples of films that aren't necessarily formulaic to start off, right? All right, maybe I should start. What is a film formula, right? I think it's a film that follows the 3-act structure. You know the 3-act structure, right? To a T. Act 1 sets up the characters, establishes the setting, and you have an inciting incident. Act 2 is dealing with the inciting incident. There's a midpoint where things change again, and then the characters fail, and then you go into the 3rd act, and there's like a sad part, it's like the down part of the movie, and then
heaven forbid. Yeah,
and then the characters like get all their stuff together, and they throw themselves full force into the climax, and then you got the movie comes to a close,
Credits
nice
full.
Nice little wrap up, and I don't think it's necessarily bad to follow like a film formula, because that's it's just the classic formula. The reason why it exists and people have identified it is because it's in so many things. Yeah, good things, good things like what was it, Parasite, that movie I'm always talking about, that I think was the best film of 2019, the South Korean film.
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah,
please do not spoil it.
Yeah, I'm gonna show it to you. But the thing is Parasite is pretty formulaic, but it, and so is like The Social Network. It follows the 3-act structure very. I wouldn't say to a T, but it basically follows it. And I feel like, those are all very highly regarded films, and they're good, which means that following it isn't necessarily bad. But then you have like the films of like Richard Linklater and Quentin Tarantino, like Pulp Fiction, Boyhood, Dazed and Confused, and then some other stuff that isn't by them, like The Florida Project or Steve Jobs, Aaron Sorkin's movie, that had nothing to do with the 3-act structure, or at least don't follow it
rigidly.
Yeah, or they take care not to follow it.
They try to avoid it as much as possible.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say this, but I think there's some parts, like short stories in Pulp Fiction, like sections of Pulp Fiction, that have like their own self-contained 3-act structure.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And Boyhood and Dazed and Confused are kind of just long periods of time. There's no real inciting incident or climax.
Yeah, especially Boyhood.
There's no climax in that film, right? Maybe when he goes away to college?
I think the only climax is, I feel like there's multiple, like, it's just every time the mom, like, has another husband. Because, there's the
climax is every time the mom has another husband?
No, not the climax. I meant to say... I don't know, I guess it's just, like... I meant to... I don't know why I thought, like, oh, like, every time there's, like, another character conflict, it's every time the mom has dates another guy or something. Mm-hmm. I don't know, there's like multiple things, because it's just like multiple things throughout that character's journey, just like growing up and everything, that he has like these like, I guess the climaxes are his multiple high points, like those really like, I mean, me and you watched the film like at least twice at this point, I think. Yeah. Like every time
I've
he's
seen
just
it way
like,
more than that. Yeah.
Me and you together have watched it twice, but no, there's definitely like points where it's just like, oh, he has like an amazing fucking moment, like where
there's no real, it's all over the place, not in a bad way, but just you can't stuff it in a box. And movies that you can more easily like lay out on the 3-act structure line, they're not bad, because they follow, they either have great cinematography, dialogue, the characters, etc. Helps it stand out. They don't exist to buck the 3-act structure. They only, they have other things that are more important to them in their presentation of the story.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Whoever it is, the writer, cinematographer. So I want to kind of take a look at how Hitch, like, it feels excruciatingly formulaic. You and I were talking about why.
Yeah.
And I mean, the first thing, besides it stays so close. There's other reasons that compound the problem of it staying so close.
Especially like in
so
the latter
close.
Half of the movie.
Yeah.
I hate that part.
And I don't know, like I was rewatching the movie, like some scenes, and you know, just examples of how it follows the structure. In the beginning of the movie, you have Hitch, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they introduce him and what he does, and they kind of establish a status quo. And you know they're only establishing this status quo so when the inciting incident happens, they can flip it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, it was this way, and now it isn't, you know?
Like, oh, shit.
Yeah. Whereas Reservoir Dogs, you know, the inciting incident kind of happens off screen. You have the people in the diner, and then, like, you cut, and it's, like, well after the inciting incident and the climax of the film even happened.
Yeah.
And they're just, like, driving to a warehouse. So, yeah, you have that opening scene where it establishes the status quo and all that stuff, and you have his character. And then the very next scene is Eva Mendes. And I didn't notice it when they introduced Eva Mendes' character, who's going to be like his foil love interest in the film.
Yeah.
And I didn't even notice this when I watched it the first time, but it took to when the second time when I was rewatching it.
Mm-hmm.
The way they establish her character is like so. The guy the writer obviously thought that he was like the smartest dude on the planet. You know, he's like, okay, you got Hitch, and he's got this, this
foolproof method.
Yeah, of his job and his life is love.
Yeah.
And then you got Eva Mendes, and her job is also love. She's a gossip columnist, right?
Yeah.
But because she's a gossip, she writes like Hollywood gossip. It's like corrupted love, and she's a cynic. Yeah. And they show that because like I think her first line of dialogue is like, "What did I tell you? They were gonna last like 6 months,"
Yeah.
And it's just so you compare it, you do the contrasting scenes. You have one thing, and then you follow it up with a scene that's like the reverse.
Or even when they first meet up in that like whatever nightclub bar,
the inciting incident. Yeah.
Where they're just like meeting up, and she's just like, oh, and what would she say to this? Ooh.
Yeah. It was a weird scene.
Yeah.
But it's the inciting incident because after that his life changes, and then you got the climax. Then you got the sad part when she finds out what his job is,
the lying
and blames
thing.
him for everything. The lying part that we hate so much. The lying, the liar reveal story arc, and then you got the climax where he's trying to win her back, and then the ending, and it sticks so perfectly to that. So, but other films do that. Like I clearly stated. So I feel like the second problem is cinematography, right?
It's so bland.
So yeah, it's kind of hard to define cinematography because cinematography, like good cinematography, great cinematography. You notice we were watching Midsommar yesterday.
Yeah,
too.
Literally right before the first time we watched through Hitch.
Yeah. Great cinematography, and the reason why is because it's hard to define, but the basic idea is good cinematography is cinematography that complements the presentation of the whole film, right? Like other aspects of the film are brought up by great or good cinematography, and it's supposed to have kind of like a mind of its own because it's what the director chooses or cinematographer chooses to show and what not to show.
Yeah,
what's on screen and what isn't on screen, and why is that purposefully what they did.
Right.
So, the visuals, they're supposed to incite, the camera's supposed to kind of incite an emotion. It's up here because it's supposed to show that a character's being dominated. It's down here to show a character being dominating.
Yeah.
It's close because it's supposed to be claustrophobic. This movie always keeps the same distance from the characters. It's just there.
Which was, again, jarring from us, and I didn't even finish watching Midsommar with you yet, but even just like Like what you were just saying, like it's just the different angles like show the different emotions or make you feel certain emotions. Not even just in conjunction with everything else happening in the film, music, tone, whatever, and yeah, like even just
it keeps the same distance.
Yeah, it just
it's just concerned with showing you what everyone's doing.
It's just they're like,
oh,
you're
supposed to have a mind
to
of its own. It's just a camera.
They just had it like, oh, well, you're supposed to feel it because of the dialogue we wrote in there, and the music. Which, admittedly,
it's not terrible dialogue.
No,
and the actors aren't terrible either. But because the camera isn't doing anything, you don't even notice. You know, like it's just there. So and it's also a problem because at no point this movie takes place in New York City, right? Yeah, and like that's an environment.
Else,
but that's an environment you can use. And at no point in the movie, you know, at no point do we feel New York City in the same way we feel the northern United States in Fargo.
Yeah.
The cold, dead, you know, feeling of isolation in the northern United States.
Yeah, no, especially that one scene where they're like the tracking shot, or even that scene where they're driving at night and they kill the couple that like they get into the car accident or whatever and they're like no witnesses.
Yeah. You can feel the environment.
And there's nobody else around.
Of an isolated just, like, road.
Yeah.
At no point does New York City feel like anything other than the thing they're standing in.
Yeah. The only time it feels like New York is like, they I think they show like a skyline shot of the Empire State a couple times. Yeah. But every other time it's just like, they probably didn't actually film in the city all that much. It's very expensive to film in the city. It just like...
but still, they had the guy... You're on a Will Smith movie.
Yeah.
Like,
it just felt like they were just like, all right, we have the scene... Because it's like, most of it's like in his apartment. There's the nightclub scene. They have a few scenes where characters are walking outside. They have... Or that I was making fun of it yesterday. The fucking guy who's like shown like he's helping him. The guy who does like Shakespeare in the Park. He's interested in the girl who plays Juliet or whatever.
And like we were calling this. You called this movie the biggest like missed opportunity you'd seen in a while, and you know, it's clear just from that standpoint. Like in the beginning of the movie, the character. I think the opening scene is probably the best scene in the entire movie because of the fast cuts. Like it's clear there was a deliberate attempt to create some kind of a feeling, which is more than the rest of the film has to say for itself. But even when they're in Central Park, like you couldn't pull back, let us feel the romance of Central Park.
Even if it was a stupid like it's done in so many films, like it was swooping, like they just like whoosh through like the trees or something like that with the camera or anything.
Yeah, there's no agenda. The camera has no agenda.
No, we just cut to like they do that weird like we're like cutting to here and it's just like flat. We're on a Shakespeare set,
and it goes hand in hand with like the editing, which is also incredibly uninspired. Nothing's happening. It's cut to cut to cut to cut to cut. There's nothing. Like, who cares?
Yeah, the transitioning. That's what I'm saying. Like, they barely use like the city to, because all they use is like, oh, the Empire States are transitioning into the next scene back at his apartment.
And it doesn't have to be this like amazing. Like, you know, I get it. Not every cinematographer is the greatest in the world. Yeah. You don't have to have that. But just, you know, you have to have a vision, and that vision can't just be, you know, you're not just telling us, you're showing us, you know, and this movie, it's just there. There's nothing there. And I think the other problem is the underutilization of the main character. And I'm not saying that this is like, you know, a Kevin James, you know, Kevin James Can't Get a Girl, the movie where he's like the main character and Will Smith is like in the background or something. Like just, I'm aware he's in every shot in this movie, or mostly every shot in this movie, but
yeah, the very few times see Will Smith is just like, when she's like back at work in the newspaper thing she works for.
You mean when you don't see Will Smith?
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like the very few times you see him is just when she's like back at work at the working on the column.
But the most interesting traits of the character are, you know, completely ignored by the writer. And this is a writer problem, you know. Yeah. This isn't a director problem or anything like that. This is purely a writing problem. is the presentation of the main character. Mm-hmm. He's sketchy, he's manipulative, and he's extremely adept at like justifying all his weird things and tricks and tactics to himself and others. He's like very adept at that. And he's a dark, and he's not a dark character, but he's a complicated character. A much more complicated character than I think this movie needed.
Yeah, it's
or deserved.
Yeah.
And we get brief hints as to the characters' like underlying insecurities in a couple scenes with Eva Mendes and Kevin James. But, they like momentarily these insecurities and little cracks underneath his character come to the surface. We get like there's this origin story that's given relatively early on. It's like presented in a way that implies Hitch is this guy who's like massively overcorrected his personality as a result of like this tragic but not completely unusual situation where he got cheated on.
Yeah.
And a few characters they give him they question him about it, but it's mostly like just shoved off. Who cares? Like that's not the main point of this movie.
I just want to point out with that too. I don't know. I feel like that was the most like beat over the head. Like I really thought it was one of the few things I actually did like about the movie, where it was just it was better just him like explaining it. Like we didn't need to see this whole like flashback. Oh, I'm a nerd, and I somehow still got the girl.
No, I don't need why they didn't need to throw show us on screen.
That felt like
he could have just said it to somebody.
That felt like such. Why didn't they just?
Well, not even said. Not said. Implied.
Yeah.
It could have been implied.
Even through the fourth wall breaking, it could have been implied.
But the writers are so they say stuff and they show stuff, and all of it's done with like no purpose, because it's the writers' like job to analyze and tear open their like most like get under the skin of their most compelling characters, but I don't know, it seems like they're much more concerned with making him out to be this like good character that you're supposed to like follow and like, than they are actually looking into this obviously complicated character. Like look at the do you remember when he was playing pool with with his friend who we never see again?
Yeah, he's like the one time. I actually forgot about that. You see him in that one
He's
scene.
playing pool with this like longtime friend that you never see again.
All we know is that he was married. That's his only character trait.
Yeah, and he calls Will Smith. He's like talking about how they used to run around and get with these like vapid girls.
Yeah.
And he literally calls like Will Smith ridiculous and vaguely pathetic.
Yeah. For like
this character that's known him forever. Mm-hmm. Calls him ridiculous and vaguely pathetic, and that is entirely true. That is a valid comment about the character, and that should have been what we looked at. Is he a good guy? Yeah. Is he actually helping people? Do we drink his Kool-Aid, or is he actually pathetic? Is all of this just like a wall he's put up to hide his own like shame, which he's actually terrible?
You see it in the scene too, because like as soon as he says that, we get the like, man, shut up, and then he's like looking around at the the two other girls that are like at the bar with like their group.
Then he goes and he does that sort of thing. It's almost like he reacted to his friend insulting him by going and picking up another girl for no reason. He never gets with her, and the guy's like, oh, he goes, hey, you want me to bring those girls over? Yeah. And his friend's like, no, I'm like married, and my wife's having a baby. Like, why would I want you to bring those girls over? And he's like, what? You can't, you don't want to, you can't talk to them because you can't bring them home?
Yeah.
Which, you know what that means? You know what that means to me? Looking at that scene,
very critically.
Very critically, it means to me, it implies that all he wants to do is talk to these women. Which means, that's exactly what he says. And what it means is that he's trying to
find the right wording.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the right wording for it. It's like he it's like he only does this because he's getting off on picking up women. Like he gets off on how he manipulates them into a situation.
I really thought and
like
this
she goes, you know, he pulls her out. He does like this whole trick to get her, you know, gives her, he pretends,
like to give her a 20, like they thought she worked at the bar or whatever.
Yeah. He gets her on the other side of the room away from all the guys, and she goes, oh, why'd you want to get me away from all these guys? And then he just smiles at her and the scene cuts. Did he just say nothing?
Yeah.
Because that's like great. Yeah. Because that means to me that he didn't actually want her for anything other than to show he could get her if he wanted to.
Yeah.
And he like outright says, I don't want to, you know, he's like, I don't, you know, I'm not concerned with getting married or anything because I just like messing around. And he calls this thing, he has like a lot of respect for his work, and he has like this code.
Yeah.
You know, this strict code that he doesn't want to help guys
just like
who just want to sleep
stands.
with girls.
Yeah.
He wants to help them
like form a connection, like a bond.
But he himself is only doing it in his free time to talk to them.
Yeah.
Not even to bring them home, which makes me feel like he's this like super insecure person. He doesn't even bring them home. All he wants to do is talk to them because that's the only thing he has the confidence to do. Mm-hmm. He like overstudied how to talk to girls and be comfortable around them. Mm-hmm. And that's all he knows how to do.
Yeah.
It's such a complicated character. And if you dug deep into that, you could make an utterly... probably one of the better films Will Smith has ever made. And one of the better characters he's ever played.
It was funny because we were also saying...
there. It's set up for you. But they don't do anything with it. They set it up. It didn't come out of nowhere. They set it up.
Yeah.
But they don't do anything with it.
I think it was also funny when we were talking about it last night, just in terms of his character too. I remember we were joking around like, yeah, this could have been like a fucking Thriller or something.
Yeah.
There's parts of it that's like, again, like talking about they have it set up and they just like don't do anything with it. Because there's the one scene that was really like where we got our weird conspiracy that it could have been a thriller or something. Yeah. Because he has this, or at least to me it was too, like that was the most obvious thing. He has that room with like a Batman like secret door, and it's just, you made the room look any darker, but he just has like the pictures of like the women of the clientele he's working with, and then like pictures of the clientele, and but then he also has like, we also see like later in the film when, you know, he's already found out that whole lie bullshit happens in that movie, that trope. You see he has like the wedding cards and stuff like that, so it's like supposed to be like, oh, he's nice, he really cared about his work or whatever.
Yeah, well, because the film's obsessed with making him into this hero, which he's not. He's not. They set it all up. He's not.
Looks like you make that any darker, like if there was like any scribble on the wall, it would have been like, he's a psychopath. It's like a thriller. Yeah. It's a romantic thriller or something like that.
But that's the problem with the movie. That's why it feels so excruciating. I think is because they don't use their characters properly. It's blandly presented. I mean, all around, it's just an average movie. But even if they had a good plot, I mean, the plot isn't terrible. No. But because they don't use everything that they have at their disposal,
it just feels
like
it's just it just becomes mediocre at a point.
Yeah, it feels like the film version of like a slab of cement.
Yeah, or like watching molasses dry. I mean, hell, I don't know if
molasses dry.
Whatever the thing is. No, because paint dry, whatever. No, because I'm pretty sure you saw me too, like halfway through this movie. I really do try to, give it my all, like 110% to really just like, I throw everything away and just like really do pay attention to the movie. I was checking out like halfway through this thing. That's what we were just saying. Like it felt mundane, and to me at a point I just checked out mentally from it. Yeah. Because they just decided to not. They had a unique thing for a romantic comedy, and just nothing. Yeah. Nothing was done.
That's really all I have to say about it.
Yeah. 1 out of 4. If I was gonna give it anything,
I'm gonna give it a 2 out of 4. It's just an average movie, and the character, what they did with the character, brings it up to like the middle point for me.
I think it was really just. This is just, again, that's my own personal thing with it. It just, not to
I know
beat the
it
bush
really
again.
really didn't do it for you. I got it.
I thought I had a high enough patience with movies. Apparently this one tested mine, and I just like, not in a very aggravating way, but I was just like, all right, well, you clearly don't give a shit about my time, so I'm gonna check out.
Yeah.
All right.